Hey, Joey, you were talking about how your view or your felt need for mentorship, it occurred to you that had changed over the years. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, the need for mentorship is, a big topic today, or even, maybe it's been repurposed around coaching, consulting or whatever, but it really seems to be, something people are receiving more often, which, made me think about, in my early 20s, I felt like I needed some guidance. I needed a couple guys to teach me, how to walk in my faith, how to be a young man. But somewhere along the way, mid 20s, it was like, I got this.
Got to figure it out.
I don't. And so from 25 to maybe 35, maybe even 40, I don't recall ever thinking I needed to have a mentor. I felt like I needed to be the mentor for others, which then, as I've reflected, it just left a huge gap. And so it's made me think, I'm 54 today going, man, I desperately have to have men in my life that are older because there's so much wisdom that they have. And so, I feel like, and that's one thing, but I want to share this that I've been thinking about. One of the things I think that happens, maybe when I was in, besides this pride hitting in my early 20s, was looking at older men, and they didn't value the same things I did. They didn't value technology. They weren't progressing along with pop culture and current trends. And so in my value system, besides that, I followed Christ, they were kind of out of touch.
Yeah.
And so what can they offer me? It was so arrogant. But, as I've learned, as I've gotten older and I've seen other younger guys, kind of shun me, it's like we start figuring out we don't need a lot of the old things anymore. And so that's why we're not progressing along with culture anymore. But the wisdom and the experiences that we have for being older is so needed.
Yeah.
I wish I would have had that in my 20s, but pride kind of took over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw too, I had a similar trajectory to what you're describing. And I would just maybe, from my story, I had my early mentors, many of them were pretty abusive. Like, it's not that they didn't teach me anything, but if I look back on it, I felt like I learned more about what not to do, with learning some good. And then as I hit my mid 20s and get some distance from those so-called mentors, my reaction to mentoring was almost a fear of being put back under the influence of someone who was going to use me for their ends or treat me like an object or keep their thumb on me. And I just think I think those kind of horror stories has echoed into our time a lot too, to where maybe with the advent of the internet is that I could just Google life a little quicker and maybe avoid what I'm talking about. I think it's all your story and mine. It doesn't help us, and I think the joy in my life has come to realize that there are people that I can learn from that are nothing like the people that were harmful and toxic in my life too. And the willingness to keep allowing my heart to be open to the people who've walked ahead of me and walked longer than I've been walking. I have a lot to learn from, and I welcome that. But we have to forgive our mentors too, and then we have to be willing to admit we've outgrown some influence too. That's a big challenge.
And that happens. So who were some of y'all's mentors? Now hopefully you had a dad or a grandfather that was a mentor.
Brian did for sure.
Yeah, we just told us about that.
Yeah.
But have you had anybody that was, other than a grandfather or a father, that was a mentor?
Brian, you do, I joked earlier because we talked before, but you have a rich lineage from your granddad to your dad of instruction. But is there someone outside of that vein that has spoken life or walked alongside you? Because as I'm handing it off to you, I'd just say mentorship is, it's one thing to let that person speak to us, but getting into the nuts and bolts of mentorship is like, who walked along with us, or who did we want to rub off on us? And like, I like being with you, And it doesn't even matter what we're talking about, just being around you is rough. Is there anyone outside of that rich heritage that you have?
Well, when
your
I
life?
when I think in terms of to say the word mentor, I was sitting here and thinking, okay, is there somebody that I've walked with for a long period of time that's been older, up in age, and I wouldn't say that there's one person, but I would say that there's been a lot of people,
Yeah.
that I've been around or spent time with at different points, where I was intentional about saying, hey, let's go to breakfast or go to breakfast with me,
Right.
and asking them about life and what's going on. And then, trying to be repetitive about that and intentional about it. Also, a little bit like Joey, what you were talking about, I don't know why, but I never thought that was something I should seek out when I was maybe in my 20s or,
Yeah.
that was never,
Yeah.
that was, I didn't know I needed that. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think back and I think, oh man, some of the challenges I had with marriage or just with life or this or that, it sure would have been nice to be able to tap into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I grew up in church, but it was just not anything that ever was
It
talked
certainly
about.
wasn't intentional, right? And
Right.
that's the thing. And I know that that's even one of the reasons that the impetus to start having these conversations is that it should be intentional. It should be, we should be living that way, that there's an expectation that older men will take younger men under their wings, older women will take younger women under the older couples will take the younger couples. Our only answer in this age right now is therapy,
Right.
because we're not doing this stuff.
Yes.
There's a
And
gap.
There's a gap, and it's a shame because there's so much wisdom that's latent wisdom right around us that's not tapped into because we don't expect it to be. And
Yeah.
we've separated the generations so much, and Sherry and I, we used to live in this neighborhood in Kansas City. The house was built in 1920, and the history of it was a lot of these houses were the Sears kit homes.
Yep.
And you back in the day, they look in a catalog and order a house, and they'd deliver it. Down to the paint, and then you'd hire carpenters to put the house up. And these were solid homes, and they're still standing. They're in Dallas and Fort Worth, or in neighborhoods close to here. There's Sears kit homes. I can see them. But the thing is you might have a 3-story, 3,000 square foot home next to an 1,100 foot home, one story, and then you might have a little duplex, and so now the suburbs, all the houses are the same size, or, same socioeconomic, but you got all this mixture. And you would get the mixture of multiple generations living in the same homes.
Yes.
And even as a child of the late 60s and 70s, I remember many times, a neighbor might run over to my mom's house and say, hey, I got to run do this. Could you watch Johnny and Stephanie or whatever, or vice versa? You took care of one another. You watched out, and I had a neighbor, his name was Bull Durham. And literally, I've told my kids, I've said, if you watch King of the Hill, I said, that was my neighborhood. That was my, Hank Hill was my next door neighbor. But Bull was smarter than Hank Hill. But my dad worked second shift. And so there were a lot of afternoons and evenings that Bull would just lean over the fence, and I'd be out throwing the ball against the wall, and he'd just talk to me. And it was just like, he was mentoring me.
Yes. Yeah.
Without trying. And you used to have that kind of thing.
Built in. Yeah.
Nowadays, if you saw some old man talking to a young kid, you go, is that guy, what kind of a sicko is he?
Right.
Yeah. We just lost so much of mentoring and the expectation of it.
On that note, my mentor, which came into my life right after I became a follower of Christ, and she was part of it, but she was female. But to your point of things have changed in some ways, but man, I mean, junior year in high school, the things that she taught me and her intentionality with me was for about 2.5 years, intense discipleship, intense mentorship. But some of it was the natural things you pick up on. Like, we would get together, at least once a month just to catch up over coffee or something or whatever, soda back then. But the way that she would ask questions that would go below the surface.
Yeah.
I'd never had anybody do that
Yeah.
before. But, that kind of stuff was being transferred for me to do the same thing with guys that were younger than me.
Yeah.
I learned how to ask questions. I learned how to dig deeper in my soul to figure out what was going on. And then, when I'd mess up, do something stupid, she would call me out on it. And I mean, she was just training me.
That's a real mentor.
A real mentor.
Yeah.
And, she's still today one of my heroes, but, you bring that up in some circles, you're like, man, you can't do that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sad.
Yeah,
There's a gap.
There is a gap, but it does take that intentionality, and I think Bobby Clinton, a lot of people know him as Robert Clinton, was a prof for years and years at Fuller Seminary and did a lot of stuff on leadership, but particularly mentoring. And he would talk about the need that we always have a need. He called it a mentoring constellation. So he'd say, you need peer mentors. These would be people that are pretty close to your age or whatever, maybe even in your industry or whatever, that you have let them know that you can speak truth into my life.
Yes.
So it's not always just older people that are, but then you need to, then there are two other types of mentors. You also need what he called an upper mentor, and it's not hierarchy. It's like, this is somebody that is older than me, more experienced than me, that I have let them know, I want you to mentor me. And then you need someone that is a downward that you are mentoring.
Yes.
Right.
And he called that a mentoring constellation. And he said, you should always live that way. That you can point to your peers that are your mentors, someone you're mentoring, and someone that's mentoring you, no matter what age you're at.
So good.
Yeah.
When you talk about peers, I like to say it this way: you need somebody around you who will look you in the face and tell you that you're stupid.
Yeah.
He really said that.
He stood
insinuated, right?
Like, I mean, all of you were just looking at me. I receive it.
The way he said stupid.
I know.
Anyway,
And I kind of leaned.
I'm sorry.
I know. He leaned in. I'm okay. I hear you, Brian.
It's mentorship. Yeah.
He's mentoring you. Yeah. He's mentoring me.
Oh, man.
Hey, but it's that kind of stuff that keeps you humble,
Right.
Keeps you on track.
Yeah.
So I really have a high value for that, especially in the peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
Right.
mentoring,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just this hunger for truth and trust. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Truth leads to trust, not trust leads to truth. We tell the truth and we start to trust. And so the thing is if we can do that in love, we start building trust if we really value truth. You can't help if somebody doesn't value it because they might run.
Yeah.
But the thing I love in this conversation, Dr. Jim Wilder, who has done some incredible work, life model ministry, if you want to call it that, but he is a 50 years Christian therapist, psychologist, but then also was at kind of ground zero in some of the breaking science on how we're understanding the brain. So I just think in this whole thing is that loving someone, like truly what he would call attaching, where, and this does, you can be willful, but it does it automatically, is when you really appreciate someone and you care about them, and you go through a little something with them. It doesn't have to be the end of the world, but you'll get bonding. So it's really bonding.
Right.
It's automatic at that point. It's not even their words. He says that the right half of our brain 6 times a second, it's nonverbal, but it's flipping through faces of whoever your people are. And so we should be intentional about making sure there are the right kind of people getting stored over here, their faces, their names, their character, because 6 times a second, the right side of your brain runs through these faces. And if you could put it into words, it asks the question, who are my people and how do I not reduce their joy? And he said that fundamentally drives our character.
Wow.
We don't want to let these people we're attached to, we don't want to let them down. So I think it's really important that we have a core group of people that are the right kind of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe they also represent where we want to go or feel
Right.
called to
That's
go.
good.
Yeah.
And it'll start becoming almost automatic how that mentoring can happen. Yes, they're talking in their presence, but even when they're not with you, your brain will automatically want to keep their joy high in your relationship.
Yeah, that's really good.
You know, a couple of thoughts on that are just, you know, the need for mentorship as I've been just pondering this and the gaps I've had is like, you know, there's flagpoles along the way for just kind of segments of your life. And a lot of times we go through them and we think we're the only people going through those moments. Man, I'm the only one that's micro-focused on my kids and they're going crazy and my wife's wondering what we should do, or what, you know. And then you just feel like you're on the island, but with a mentor there that's a little further along that you respect, can take you off the talk you off the ledge. Say that's normal.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then fast forward to the ends. Like sometimes, you know, as I'm really enjoying the fact that coaching and mentorship is, you know, a healthy thing to talk about these days. And for me, my parents are at the age now where, you know, my dad's 94. I mean, and I think about them a lot and the value that they have. But one thing that we need is we need mentors till the end.
Yes.
And we also need to have mentors that teach us how to die well.
Yes.
That's a gap.
Yes.
There's a lot of lonely people that are on an island not knowing what to do because they didn't have someone show them well. And so we need mentorship till the end.
Yes.
It's definitely something I've been pondering.
Yeah. You know, as you were saying, I was thinking about the group of the famous writers, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, a couple of who were the other, they called themselves the Inklings.
The Inklings.
That those guys, they were peer mentors. You know, they were lifelong friends that were mentoring one another. And you're like, any one of these guys was like high cotton, as we would say, right? Like amazing. But it goes to that, like at every point in your life, you still need it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the face thing that you were mentioning. I don't want to embarrass Sam here, but Sam, so I was really with Sam and Marge for several years, and then we moved away and moved to Missouri. And there's been times it's gone 15 years without me seeing Sam. But there were times, especially as a young pastor, I would get myself in a crack. Or I'd be dealing with somebody difficult. Or maybe I was the difficult person somebody else was having to deal with.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. And this is where I don't want to embarrass Sam, but I would be like, what would Sam do? You know, and I had somebody like that
Yes.
that had mentored me,
Yes.
that even maybe if I hadn't talked to him for 15 years, he was still saving my bacon, man.
Yes.
Because I was able to go, because the answer to that question, what would Sam do, was not the same answer as what would I do.
Right. What's fascinating
You
is
know.
how we're driven, like it's human to be oriented that way. And the more that we discover is that we are people centered. And and our part in stewarding that mystery is like, I want to make sure that I'm looking for those kind of people so that I can make quality attachments to, so I can ask, how would Sam do this?
Yeah.
And that's, I think the encouragement is that it's not just Googling it.
Yeah.
It's real relationships. And not to get too nerdy on the brain stuff, which I don't know, but I've memorized a little bit, is this right hemisphere, which is a relational engine, is pre-conscious. So before you even think to ask the question, that part of your brain is looking for who's the person. Who's the person? It's looking for a person. And then it hands off to the logic, and then we start trying to solve it with information. But our core wants to know who in my attachments represents what I need here. And I want to raise their joy. Like our fundamental base heart is driven by joy. Like I want to make my mentors proud. That's a good thing. I want to make these people I respect.
Yeah. Which making them proud, that's different than impressing.
No, yeah, exactly. I want to raise their joy. And joy, if we want to nerd out on it for a second, joy in the brain is I delight to be with you. So it's always about presence, is that I want them to delight or light up in my presence because I'm receiving what they represent,
Right.
what they've taught me.
Right. That's good.